The Rainbow Tower. Written by Alex Tymms. Illustrated by R H Stewart. Episode 43. Outside. Jed didn't try to run. Instead, he took a shaky step forward towards the towering wall of waste and rot. "So you listen to him now, do you?" Jed asked. His throat wouldn't let him shout, so he spoke as clearly and evenly as he could. "Let me ask you this. Who was it who used your bodies for experiments? Who was it who ordered the murder of all you Red executives? Who was it who turned the builders into mindless slaves that he used as his own private army? You all know who it was, and yet you still let him lead you." The mass churned right in front of him. Jed tried not to register or think about the sights swirling in the glistening wall near enough to touch. "There were never meant to be colours," Jed went on. "The tower was designed to grow, to make room for everyone. It was supposed to be a good place to live. But that was before people like him took charge." Jed didn't need to look at or point to Swenson. "Him and people like him who always try to make the system work for themselves instead of for everyone. They are the ones you should blame." Out of the corner of his eye, Jed noticed Katie watching him. "A nice speech," came the sarcastic voice from above. "But I think we've heard enough. Crush him!" Swenson roared. Only nothing happened. The mass, which held him up, didn't move. "Kill him!" Swenson yelled in frustration. But still the mass didn't move. "Oh, come on! You surely don't believe him," Swenson shouted. "This building wasn't meant to keep you safe. It was meant as a prison, to control you. Your grandparents were promised security and convenience. But what they weren't told was that it was all a ruse to make them spend longer at work. Their jobs became their lives, and that was the plan. They wanted to trap you in all this endless cycle of work so his family could control every part of your lives." "That's what you wanted, not him," Katie shouted as she stepped forward beside Jed. "And you can't stop lying, can you?" "Oh, lying, am I?" Swenson spat. "And what about his mother? She knew your fate if you were a builder. She knew people were being recycled. And what did she do about it?" The mass churned violently. "Nothing. Because she was spending her time fighting the likes of you," Jed replied. "She knew she couldn't do everything at once, and removing the colours was her priority until you stopped her." "Oh, pah!" Swenson spat. "And it wasn't her who fed people's bodies to the building or used their remains to grow our food." Katie turned to look at Jed, her eyes wide. The mass was in turmoil. "Oh, didn't you know?" Jed asked. "We've been eating each other for years." A look of panic crossed Swenson's face as he tried to ride the churning tide beneath him. Jed knew he nearly had him. If he could just... Then he saw something moving strongly through the mass. It was clawing its way up towards Swenson, its arms pulling it forward as its legs dangled uselessly behind. Jed stared wide-eyed as he realised who it was. It was his father. "Dad, no, stop!" he said under his breath. The mass was clearly fighting with itself. One second the snarling Swenson would dip towards Jed and Katie. The next the chief executive would soar upwards. Then his father broke out the top. "Enough of this madness!" he roared as he grabbed Swenson. "And leave my son alone!" Swenson laughed as he easily overpowered Jed's dad. A body that had spent too many years being encased in bone was no match for the nutrient-enhanced Swenson. "You see what hypocrites his family are," the chief executive announced. "He abandons his child when a baby, and now it suits him. He pretends to care about him. And you think they care about you? It's all meaningless words. Swenson laughed again as the man was dragged back into the mass. Without turning away from Swenson, Jed checked exactly where Katie was. "Now is not the time for words. Now is the time for action," Swenson shouted. Jed grabbed Katie and hauled her backwards as the mass fell. She screamed in fright, both at being grabbed and at the sudden impact where they'd just been standing. "Run!" Jed croaked, dragging her to her feet and pulling her out the way once again as the mass slammed into the bridge deck, sending shockwaves through the bone and missing them by inches. Behind them, Swenson howled in triumph. Jed's dad had disappeared in the surging waves of the mass, and yet again it plunged towards Jed and Katie. Thank you very much for listening to The Rainbow Tower. To see more of R H Stewart's excellent artwork, you'll find him on Instagram at roy.hootson.stewart. For Alex Tymms, why not try the novel OutCaste at ao3.com? Or, for something completely different, check out the Amier series on YouTube or at amier.com, also by Alex Tymms. The Rainbow Tower. Text copyright Alex Tymms. Illustrations copyright R H Stewart. The right of Alex Tymms and R H Stewart to be identified as the author and illustrator of this work has been asserted in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988.